Oh, crikey, is that me in the big screen there? Get me off.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to this full council meeting of the 26th of September, and unusually it's on a Tuesday. I would first like to acknowledge Rosh Hashanah, the recent two-day Jewish New Year celebration, and wish the Jewish community in East Renfrewshire Shana Tova, or good year for the coming year. Now, as usual, I advise that the meeting is hybrid. We have a number of participants joining the meeting remotely, and it's being streamed live and stored for later viewing. I can suspend the webcast if I think it will affect proceedings. A recording of the meeting will be published on the Council's YouTube channel. If there are any motions or amendments, they need to be moved and seconded as usual, and all votes will be as roll call, as not all elected members are in the chamber in person. Can I remind everybody that I will be flexible within reason in the length of time people can speak due to circumstances. And now I will turn to the agenda. Item 1. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thanks, Provost. Apologies from Councillors Bamforth, Devlin, Ireland and McLean. I did receive one from Councillor Wallace, but I see that you're online, Councillor, so you'll be marked down as attending.
Okay, thank you very much. On to item 2. The Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interest they may have in any of the items on the agenda. Are there any such declarations of interest, colleagues? None.
No.
Thank you very much. None intimated. And on to item 3 then. So this is on page 3. It's the annual statement on adequacy and effectiveness of governance, risk management and internal control systems. And it is the report for the year ending 31st of March 23, remitted to the Council for noting by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. And I will now invite Councillor Andrew Morrison to comment. Thank you, Councillor Morrison.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee met earlier this afternoon, at which we considered the annual statement on the adequacy and effectiveness of the governance, risk management and internal control systems. The committee found these to be appropriate and have duly remitted them to this afternoon's full council for further consideration. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions by other councillors? Otherwise, can we note the annual statement? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Cunningham. On to item 4. That's the 2022-23 annual accounts for the Council's charitable trusts and external audit, ISA 260 report, and that's on page 9. Again, this has been remitted to the Council for consideration by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, which took place immediately prior to this Council meeting. So the report relates to the audit of the 2022-23 annual accounts for charitable trusts that the Council acts as trustee for, and the associated external audit report in respect of the trusts. Again, I would invite Councillor Morrison as committee chair to comment.
Thank you very much, Provost. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee met earlier this afternoon, as previously indicated, and we reviewed the audited annual accounts of these 7 charitable trusts and the combined audit report which covers those 7 trusts, as well as the financial statements of the Council overall, which is in the next item on the agenda. Please to note that the accounts have been awarded a clean audit certificate in all 7 cases for these trusts, and we would now remit them to full Council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. Are there any other comments from any of my colleagues on this item? Councillor O'Donnell.
It's just a couple of comments, really. One is obviously the cost of preparation of these in terms of the audit perspective is pretty eye-watering, considering the total size of the funds under control and the number of transactions. So I think officers if they could look at that for next year in terms of how we address that. And also there are some some of these items are very small individual trusts, and would it make sense for some of these to be wound up in an appropriate manner?
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Edlin.
I was at the audit and scrutiny meeting, and I raised the same point as the leader just made. Could I also add that I raised the point that these days charitable trusts are a very good vehicle for collecting income tax rebates, and if people are giving money, say they give £100, then that becomes £125. And we have these vehicles lying there, and we're not really using them at all. They're just really petty cash in terms of the council's turnover, paying a huge audit fee for it. And I have asked that it be looked at to try and either establish new trusts to get in more money for education and other matters that the council is involved in. There's a huge amount of goodwill towards education expenses by the residents, particularly in my ward, but throughout the council. And if people were to pay that money over and do it the right way, we could get an extra 25% easily. And it's not difficult. Once you've got the legal set up, it's quite straightforward to do it. And I'm hoping that this can be done either by means of using the trusts that are there, or by setting up a new one by the council. And for example, at the moment the province has a defibrillator fund which has about 9 or 10,000. If that was a charitable trust, and it could be done, I would have thought relatively easily, that would boost it by another 2,500. So it's a simple thing like that, although it's not that simple, I accept, but it can be done in a relatively straightforward way. And I do think that we should look at, there are alternatives to the audit process for this. I can't remember what it's called, but Councillor Morrison certainly knows what it is as like an accountant.
Independent examination.
Independent examination, which would save a huge amount of money. And I do think the Chief Executive should be writing to the auditors about the cost of that audit for that item. It seems eye-watering. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other comments from colleagues, can we note the comments made and note the accounts for the trusts and the accompanying external auditor's report? Agreed? Thank you.
Agreed.
On to item 5 now, 2022-23 annual accounts. So the report and accounts are also remitted to the Council. This is page 27. For consideration by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. It was remitted from that committee which took place immediately preceding this full Council. So a number of amendments to the printed papers have been submitted, so are tabled and they're available in the public gallery. And again, I'd like to invite Councillor Morrison as the committee chair to comment and move the report and amendments as one. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you again, Provost. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee has also reviewed the audited annual accounts for East Renfrewshire Council, and we examined the external auditors and passed comment on their findings. In particular, I would point out that after today's committee papers were issued, as you alluded to, Provost, the external auditors, Ernst & Young, received guidance from their in-house technical team requiring a change in the pension valuation approach. This is quite a technical area of accountancy. So both the external auditors and the Council's chief accountant have worked over the weekend to produce a revised set of accounts, and obviously we have the noted amendments and the separate sheet before us today. Further to that, these changes, I would note that they do not affect the Council's general fund or usable reserves in any way. The pension evaluation reserve is indeed separate, and it's sadly not something which could be assessed for general Council services and spending. At the same time as making these pension valuation changes, officers also took the opportunity to correct an error in the risk appetite table within the management commentary. So as you can see on the final page of the appendix papers, the reputation, compliance and financial risks were shown as being in the range of 1 to 2, but actually the risk management matrix which applied throughout that year was 1 for those areas. So that will be reflected in the final accounts that we potentially approve today. Delighted to report that the external auditors and council staff have again managed to complete the annual financial statements in line with the required deadline of 30th of September, hence why we are meeting on the Tuesday rather than the Thursday promised, which is 1 month earlier than last year. This is especially notable given that it is the first year that our new external auditors, Ernst & Young, have been in place in the engagement. Further to that, I would note that the accounts have been awarded an unqualified audit certificate, so that could be described as a clean audit certificate. In other words, the auditors are happy with the accounts which are presented, and there are no unadjusted errors. As previously advised in June this year, the accounts show that the council operated within budget, benefited in particular from increased investment income due to the national interest rates and careful management of Treasury, and also enhanced council tax collections, and closely controlling budget lines as to produce additional flexibility in addressing anticipated budget challenges in the current year 2023-24 and beyond. At the year-end date, 31st March 2023, the balance on the non-earmarked general fund reserve sat at 6.658 million, which is 2.3% of our budget. The Council's recommended target range for this is between 2% and 4%, and I would further note transfers of 5.6 million were transferred to further earmarked reserves. The Auditor's report is largely positive, as always. Various audit findings are listed. We did, of course, discuss these earlier this afternoon at Audit and Scrutiny, and there are action plans to be addressed by the officers in terms of fully implementing those recommendations. So I would like to thank Margaret, thank Barbara, thank all the accounts team within the Council, the Internal Audit Department, and of course our external auditors for all of the hard work in helping us meet the deadline of the end of the month. And I would conclude, Provost, by saying I now remit the financial statements and the audit report to Council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. Is there a seconder for this motion by Councillor Morrison? Councillor Buchanan is the Vice Chair of the Audit Scrutiny, and I see he's acknowledged that he is the seconder. Thank you very much. So I'll open it up for any questions or comments by colleagues. Councillor O'Donnell.
First of all, I'd like to echo the Chair's comments, and thanks for the finance team for getting these reports together. It's a huge amount of work. If anyone's had the time to actually read all of it, there's an enormous amount of detail included within that, not least in the management commentary as well. So it's well done to, and it's not just one or two people that's involved with this, it's a whole team. So well done to everyone for hitting the timetables. My second thanks is actually to the auditors, because I think their report is very well written and is very, very clear, and that can be very difficult for auditors. Being an ex-auditor, I know that can be difficult to actually write in plain English. One question and one ask for future reports. When you're looking at the current year misstatements, section F, page 226, whenever I see potential misstatements or adjustments, I always get a bit worried. But it would be helpful if it's clarified if this is affecting the general fund and usable reserves versus effectively most of these, as far as I understand it, are really balance sheet presentational issues and less to worry about and less to have a concern about. So if I could ask for clarity on that for reports going forward, that would be very, very helpful. Just going to the audit fees, I've already had a pop at you about the trust fees. But can you clarify, please, this extra £48,000 for additional audit procedures, and whether these will all be passed on to the council, or whether you will be absorbing these this year, which is quite common for first year of audits, and if not, I would ask your team to consider your own best value approach to delivering the audit when councils are facing flat cash funding settlements, particularly dealing with, in this case, a lot of balance sheet presentational items. And I know the pension has taken a lot of time and energy, but at the end of the day, it doesn't affect our usable reserves or general fund. So I wonder if you could respond. Am I allowed to ask the auditors directly? I'm not sure. Etiquette and yeah. Thank you.
Yes, it's open for questions or comments now, and we have Rob Jones of Ernst & Young here, our external auditor, so if you would like to respond, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. So just in terms of the ask, we can update, I think that's a perfectly sensible ask in terms of including the impact on the general fund and usable reserves and the adjustments. You're correct that you're correct that the majority of, or I think all of the audit adjustments this year would have impacted the unusable reserves, so either the valuation reserve or the pension reserve or other unusable reserves. So that is a correct assessment. So we can update that actually as part of our finalisation for our report for Audit Scotland this year and take that forward, take that going forward. In respect of the additional work around the audit fees, I do recognise the Council's point. I suppose what I would observe, just in terms of the observation about absorbing the costs, the auditors, we have absorbed the expected costs around the first-year audit. That was an ask of Audit Scotland as part of the Audit Scotland appointment. So apologies if that wasn't clear. The additional costs around our initial audit procedures, which are required as part of a first-year audit, the new auditing standards that have been implemented, and just generally the expectation that additional time is required in year one because we're not familiar with the council and its arrangements, and we don't have a prior audit file to work from in the same way that we would under other audits. That cost has been absorbed by EY. In line with the expectations of the Audit Scotland framework. The additional fees are specifically limited to the very technical accounting issues which have been addressed or which have been required to be addressed in order to sign a clean audit opinion. I do take the point about there's I suppose a bit of an issue in terms of, or a challenge in terms of our requirements and the council's requirements to first of all to produce a CIPFA code compliant set of accounts, and our requirement to complete an ISA, International Standards Auditing compliant audit. That does require a significant amount of work and often additional work around areas of the balance sheet in particular, like you say, property, plant and equipment and the pensions, which don't necessarily impact the general fund. So that is an accurate assessment. Unfortunately, that is the work that is required to be able to complete the audit opinion and sign an unqualified opinion.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, but the point remains, that's equivalent of 2 full-time equivalent members of staff in a time when we're making budget cuts. So I'll leave it with you and the officers, but it's something to consider, if not for this year, certainly for future years, as to how you can contribute to the best value, and you've audited our best value, so I'd ask you to look at that in terms of your own requirements going forward.
Sorry, I hope that was caught on microphone, because there was 2 microphones on at the same time. I hope we caught Councillor O'Donnell's comments, because it was very important. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this? Otherwise, can we note and agree the comments and also approve the 2022-23 annual accounts, and note the external auditor's draft annual audit report and the related ISA 260 report, and also to echo the thanks that have already been said for all the staff and the external audit, all the work that's been put into this, and in particular the recent intense work. So thank you very much for that. So we've approved that. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. And on to item 6. Item 6, it's the availability of school places at Maidenhill Primary School, and that's on page 237, and it's a report by the Director of Education there. And I wonder if, Mark, if you would like to speak to introduce this first of all, and then I'll open it out to colleagues for any questions or comments. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Provost. purpose of the report is to advise Council of the need for additional school places to accommodate the projected future catchment children at Maidenhill Primary School and to seek an approved approach to meet this demand. Members will be aware that Maidenhill Primary School opened in 2019 and it was based at that point on a particular expected pupil yield based on the historical analysis that we had in place. However, as the paper sets out, the number of pupils from that area has been greater. That's principally for two main reasons. Paragraph 23 of the paper sets out the way that in which the pupil yield has been higher for non-denominational primary education than in previous developments, and in addition to that, the rate at which the properties have been built in that area has been significantly faster than initially was expected and planned for, and paragraphs 31 to 33 provide more details. As a result of those kind of two main factors, there is greater demand for the school places at Maidenhill Primary School than was projected, and so it is likely that all catchment children in the future would not be able to be accommodated at the school within its current planned capacity. To accommodate, therefore, the projected future demand, we've set out three options have been provided to Council for consideration, and these commence in paragraph 48. Option C would increase the school's capacity by adding a 4-classroom extension. As Council will be aware, such capital plans normally progress through the Corporate Asset Management Group and then the Council's capital planning processes. However, to ensure that we do have sufficient places before the end of the school year 24-25, Council is being asked to consider this as one of the options at an earlier stage. So essentially, it's recommended that Council notes the number of children accessing places at Maidenhill is higher than projected, notes the projected roles for the short, medium and long term, and considers the options for ensuring sufficiency of places at Maidenhill Primary and agrees a preferred option. And Provost, if option C was chosen, authorises the Head of Accountancy to adjust the capital programme within existing resources to allow design and survey work to proceed immediately.
Sorry, Mark, I'm very sorry. We seem to have lost the signal, so I don't know if we have to do that all over again, but John will tell us about that.
It's a shame for everybody here.
I would say, Provost, that the webcast still seems to be going out all right. The issue seems to be with the connection between this laptop and the screens in the chamber. I'll see what I can do about that just now.
I think it's fair to say that we can still hear online, although you may not be able to see us.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Buchanan. That's good to know. So we don't have to ask Mark to repeat that. You got all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will ask if there are any questions. First of all, Mark, did you finish? Yes. Okay, are there any questions? I think I'll just wait a second till we see if we can get people back on the screen. So, John, should you stop the recording till we get this technical hitch fixed?
I've paused the recording, promised.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much now, and that's us resumed after technical hitch has been addressed. So thank you to Mark Ratter, Director of Education, for his presentation. And I'm now going to open this out to my colleagues for any comments or questions. And first of all, Councillor Redland and then Councillor Wallace. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I've had an ongoing concerns about Maidenhill Primary School because since I was elected last May, it's been apparent that the school is not being large enough in terms of pupil intake for the catchment of the school. The area, more and more over this time and the ongoing future, young families are moving into this area. New buildings which were not anticipated have become available. and the school is just simply not big enough for the catchment. Now, my view is that that should have been noticed at the planning stage earlier, but that's history. We can't go back there. So the suggestion that we are going to build 4 extra classrooms in this way is certainly welcome by me. My view personally is that I think this area is going to get even bigger. I think there's going to be more building, more young people coming in to that area. And I believe consideration should be 5 classrooms, not 4, because the cost of a 5th classroom would incrementally might be very small. And I don't think having an extra classroom or space will do any harm to anybody, and not having it will be very detrimental if it's needed later. Now, during the appeals process this year and last year, I had to deal with many constituents, because this school is in my ward, and I had many phone calls from parents for one reason or another over their lack of placements available for them at Maidenhill Primary School. And it really is essential that we get this done, and I would hope that the council could consider an extra room at 5 rooms instead of 4, because whatever happens, despite projections, I do not see Maidenhill becoming smaller in any way. In fact, I think it's going to get a lot bigger, and the land adjacent to it could very well be designated building land in the future. So that is my proposal at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Edlin. Mr Ratter, would you like to respond to why 4 rather than 5?
Thank you, Provost. I mean, maybe if I can address the issue around whether there are children in the catchment that don't have places, that's not the case. Maybe just to I've contacted the Education Department that live in the catchment, have been able to be allocated places, and we've got spaces in 23-24 to facilitate further growth. In terms of why 4 rather than 6 or 8 or more, essentially, as members will be aware, the council has a duty under best value to ensure that we're not spending over and above what we would need. We made sure that, I mean, that was, I suppose, initially why the school was built to the size that it was, because at that point the council's methodology and agreed approach around pupil yield indicated that that would be sufficient. So in 2016, when it was planned and we did the public meetings, that was the available information. However, as a council, as a department, we work closely with the environment team in planning, and we continue to review those, and the latest estimates continue to be built in that way. So at this stage, the projections that we've got, we look at the number of children in nursery schools, so we're able to project that going forward for the next 2 years, and we also link with the NHS data, and we look at the CHI data to look at those under the age of 3, to look at those projections, and you can see they're included in the appendix, and therefore that's why we've put forward 4 classrooms, Provost.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come in again, Councillor Edlin, on this?
I just want to say that during earlier this year, during the appeals process, I'm aware of one constituent whose child lives in the catchment who was not able to get a place at Maidenhill and had to go to Mearns Primary. I could be mistaken, but I don't think so.
Okay, that's maybe something that you can clarify later on. But where we are with this proposal, I'll now go to Councillor Wallace. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. No, I can understand where Councillor Edlin's coming from. I think we know all the problems that we had, that neighbouring Renfrewshire had, in which, indeed, when they were offered additional capacity from a company that was supporting them, they said no, only to find out that, by crikey, if only we had actually taken that extra capacity at the time. So I understand where the question Councillor Edlin is asking, and it's just to get a confirmation that these new figures that are being used, that there is sufficient confidence with officers that they are accurate. There's also a concern that we're going to spend 2.6 million on something that is going to be capacity of 92% by these figures. So the other side of the coin is, would 3 classrooms do instead of 4? But that's you have to arrive at a figure, and you're obviously erring on the safe side, which is 4 classrooms. But as I say, I understand where Councillor Edlund's coming from, and just hopefully that officers are confident that these new figures are accurate, and we're not going to find ourselves in a very difficult position 3 or 4 years down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Ratter, would you like to respond, please? But I think you have said that circumstances have changed. Okay,
yeah, happy to respond to Councillor Wallace's question. I think it's fundamental. I mean, we are in the same position as Councillor Wallace. We want to make sure that the school is large enough and that we can make sure that we meet our duty in terms of providing sufficiency of places. We also need to do that in a way that recognises the council doesn't have infinite resources. I would love to be able to build large extensions on all of the schools. There isn't simply enough money to be able to do that at the moment, so we have to strike the appropriate balance, and we believe that 4 is the right balance. We've taken a great deal of care around the projections. As I say, we've looked at the other areas up in Newton Mearns, such as West Acres, over a 10 to 15 year period, so that we're looking long term to see whether that number would go down and whether, as Councillor Wallace said, we would be okay with just 3 classrooms rather than 4. Again, it looks as though 4 would be the appropriate number. As I say, we've looked at those children not even in the school, through the nursery class and through the CHI data, through the sort of NHS. So we've taken all the available information and modelled it as well as we can. I mean, I have to say, and the paper makes that clear, that there is always an element, these are projections. We can't guarantee these, but these are the best estimates that we can make in that way, and hopefully that provides some reassurance to Councillor Wallace.
Thank you very much. I'll bring Councillor Morrison in a second, but as you know, I'm always looking for people not to use abbreviations that are not really generally well known. Can you clarify, Mr Ratter, what you mean by CHI data?
Apologies, Provost. That's the data that the NHS use as a sort of unique identifier for each individual's health record.
And could you tell me, this is question time, what
my colleagues are helping me out, community...
Sorry, one second, one at a time. So CHI is CHI. Could you clarify what these stand for, please?
Community Health Index.
Thank you very much. Just testing. So you pass. So thank you very much for that. And Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, thank you very much, Provost. I know everything that Mark Ratter said. I just really wanted to get some clarity in terms of getting the numbers to tie up, because paragraph 65 on page 245 refers to this 92% capacity is where we will plateau with the extension. But table 3 on page 249 shows a different set of figures in terms of, August 2027. I think that says we're expecting a school roll of 532 in that year. The current capacity is 420. It would become 540 per paragraph 57. I'm getting that to only a number of 8 headroom. That's obviously a far higher percentage than 92%. Is there something here I'm not reading correctly?
We have Joe McCaig, who's Head of Education Services, in attendance today too. So I'll ask Joe if he would respond. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Morrison. In terms of paragraph 65, the numbers that we're looking at there are even longer term. So those are looking at a period of time after the build at the area has been completed. So we've looked, as Mark Ratter mentioned earlier, we've looked at previous building establishments and residential developments across the council to trying to determine when that increasing role and those increasing number of children coming out of those properties plateaus. So that's generally about 5 to 6 years after the build has been actually completed. So those numbers are actually further ahead again than the numbers which are being presented within the table in the appendix. In terms of the numbers and your reference about the planning capacity of the schools are based on class sizes of 30 across all stages of P1 to primary 7. And of course that makes it easy for us to plan for those pupils as they move through the stages and the pupil-teacher ratios change. In effect, though, those are actually higher in terms of those with a working capacity, based on the 25 pupils at primary 1, 30 at P2 and 3, and 33 through to primary 7. In addition to that, where we require to do so, we can make better and more efficient use of our classifications by employing additional teachers at those stages. And so in effect, we can actually increase those roles even further than that. So on that case, it's on the basis of our planning capacity, which is the minimum number of places we could really have. But in effect, through efficient classification and the use of staffing, we can increase those increase those further to negate the pupil-teacher ratio as well. So it gives us that extra headroom.
Can I ask a supplementary at all, Provost? And it's said to either of the education officers, whoever is best placed to answer. I'm a member of the Planning Applications Committee, as is Councillor Edlin, and we all receive the emails every week with a notification of planning applications which have been requested. And the number of extensions to family homes we receive every week is quite substantial. And I just really wanted to ask, in terms of not the number of homes increasing, but the size of the homes growing with larger families, that will obviously have an impact. Has that been considered in the calculation of this people-product ratio?
Mr. Ratter.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. We're looking at actual data from essentially two areas for the Maidenhill catchment. We're looking at the new housing, and we're looking at the number of pupils that have arisen out of the essentially 570 homes, so about 2/3 of the way through. And then we're looking at a longer term modelling of what I would describe as the sort of Mearnskirken area just to the east of Asda. So that area, the sort of more traditional homes, that has a slightly different pupil product ratio because it's a much longer established. We're also looking, as I say, at the new housing, but then also doing a comparison with somewhere like West Acres, because you tend to get a sort of bulge, as you would imagine, where families move in, they have their children, they might extend the homes and so on, but then there's a certain churn where some will move on. But longer term, we want to make sure that we've modelled that appropriately, that once all that housing is developed in that area, we've got sufficient capacity, but without building it too large. So, I mean, the easy thing would be just to say, oh, let's just build an extra 8 classrooms on. But actually, that wouldn't be best value for the council. So we're trying to strike that balance that's appropriate in terms of making sure that we can meet that responsibility, to have places for the families so that they can move in, but without it costing council more than necessary.
I appreciate those answers. Thank you, Provost.
Are there no other questions or comments? And without that, if you look at the recommendations, there are 3 options there. So which option is being proposed, Councillor O'Donnell?
I'll propose option C, which is introduce a 4-classroom extension to the school.
Okay.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Edlin? Are there any amendments to that? Okay, so we are agreed. The recommendations are: the Council notes the number of children accessing places at Maidenhill Primary School is significantly higher than projected, notes the projected roles for the school in the short, medium and long term, and considered the 3 options for ensuring sufficiency of school places at Maidenhill Primary School, and agrees a preferred option, which is C, unanimously. And D, should option C be chosen, as it has been, authorises the head of accountancy to adjust the 2023-24 capital programme within existing resources to allow design and survey work to proceed immediately. Is that agreed?
Right.
Unanimous. Okay, and that concludes the business on the agenda for today's full council meeting. Thank you for your attendance and for your input. Thank you.